Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks at William & Mary, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, Pathways to Develop Your Leadership. Today's webinar is part of William & Mary's second annual Professionals Week and is made possible by the support of the William & Mary Alumni Association and our One Tribe, One Network initiatives. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will notify registrants once the recording is available online at wmalumni.com/webinars. Questions are welcome throughout today's presentation. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time will allow. If you roll over the bottom portion of the Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. Please use that feature to submit your questions. Throughout the webinar, I will monitor the questions and share them with our presenter at relevant times during her presentation. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest presenter today. After graduating from William & Mary with a BA in International Relations, Wendy returned home to San Francisco Bay Area, where she started her career in sales and strategic alliances in datacom and telecom. After completing a year-long leadership development program in 1991, she was trained as a coach and launched a part-time coaching business in addition to her full-time career. Wendy has clients throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. The portfolio of services that Wendy provides includes partnering with executives and business owners to overcome challenges and achieve professional and personal goals, as well as supporting teams and organizations through coaching, assessments, and workshops. Wendy is the winner of Best Executive and Leadership Coach of Las Vegas for 2018 and 2019 by the Las Vegas Small Business Excellence Awards program, and three-time winner of Best Life Coach of Las Vegas by the Best Businesses of Las Vegas. Her community service efforts involve pro bono coaching and workshops for nonprofits, as well as being a diamond sponsor of the Women's Leadership Conference at the MGM the past several years. As such, Wendy has flown in over 30 credentialed coaches from as far away as the UK and Sweden to provide complimentary coaching sessions to over 500 women. In December of 2019, she was recognized by the International Association of Women as an inspirational influencer for being a leader in her field and for giving back to the community. In addition to her full-time coaching practice, Wendy trains people to become coaches through Accomplishment Coaching International's Coach Federation accredited coaches training and leadership program. Prior to becoming a full-time coach, Wendy was a global director in a Fortune 100 firm with accountability to over $500 million in annual revenues. She is most proud of stepping away from her corporate career to care for her grandmother, who was then in her mid-90s. She has been coaching full-time ever since. We are truly delighted to have Wendy join us this afternoon as part of the William & Mary's Professionals Week to share her Master Certified Coach expertise and advice with our William & Mary community. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. All right. So today, what I would like to do as our pathways to developing your leadership is introduce to you the Leadership Circle Profile Assessment as one opportunity to really develop your leadership. We're going to identify some of the key factors that differentiate the Leadership Circle from other assessments that you might use for your leadership. And I'm going to provide an overview of the Leadership Circle. Now, I know that some of you have already taken the free assessment that we offered, and this won't be new to you, and some of you may not have. So I'll walk you through a little bit of this, and we're going to review some of the self-assessments that you took if you indicated that you were interested in doing a brief debrief of those. So here we go. A little bit about the framework of the Leadership Circle. I love the Leadership Circle because it connects actual patterns of action with your habits of thought. So what it does is look at the internal assumptions or beliefs that you may have, which determine how you actually show up as a leader, influencing your leadership and your management. So both the business operations are affected as well as your leadership skills for people. It highlights your skills and effective capabilities as well as opportunities for development, and allows you to see how these assumptions or beliefs that you may have really translates into these leadership styles. And some of them are really working for you and you definitely don't want to change them, but some of them might be getting in the way of your ability to achieve your strategic goals. And those are the ones you might want to look at. I believe it's the most comprehensive leadership assessment that I've found on the market. That's why I chose to be certified in it. It really brings together every school of thought of leadership development. So everything from cognitive versus behavioral. It looks at Horney's character structure, moving toward and against and away from. It brings in 360-degree leadership research. It's also not actually a measurement of, but it does give us an indication of where a person might be in terms of the adult stages of development. So it's very comprehensive. As I said, there is a component of 360-degree feedback in this. You did not see that if you did the free self-assessment. So in the 360-degree feedback portion for the paid version, it provides both quantitative for people who are numbers, analytical people. They love it because you get reams of data. There's also qualitative data. You select the actual evaluators that would be providing feedback by doing an online assessment. They're answering the same questions that you would have completed in your online assessment, same exact set of questions. And only your boss and your boss's boss would you know their specific responses. Everyone else is providing completely confidential feedback, which is really the only way to get good data. And you are providing 3 different groups of people: your peers, your direct reports, and others, as well as your boss and your boss's boss. And you get to see those group by group. So you'll get to compare how your peers view you compared to your direct reports, compared to others. And others might be people from a past company, people from a religious organization, people from a charitable organization where you volunteer, anyone who's seen you in a leadership capacity. We don't recommend you include family. And you also get to see the gaps between how you see yourself as a leader and how others view you. And that is often quite remarkable. And you have seen, for those of you who took the self-assessment, your own view of your leadership, but often it's quite different from how others see you. You might think you have weaknesses where others think you're really strong, and vice versa. All right, so just to give an overview, this is displayed as a very simple graph, like a bullseye. And in addition, you've got all of the data, as I said, for analytical people, reams of numbers that people can look through, but it gives you, at first glance, a very simple bullseye view where you've got your relationship-oriented things on the left and your task-oriented things on the right. The data from the center of the circle to the outer edge of the circle is displayed as percentiles. And in a paid version, how you view yourself is represented as a dark line, and how other people view you would be a shaded area. And in the inside circle of the bullseye, it's a summary, whereas the outer edge provides more detail. The top half of the bullseye is the creative competencies, and the bottom half are the reactive tendencies. You want, ideally, in terms of effective leadership and business performance, you would want to score high on the top and fairly low on the bottom in terms of most effective leadership. So there are also summary dimensions, and these are scales that are an overall view that give you kind of a bottom line of how you're performing as a leader. One of them is giving you the difference between the reactive and the creative portion, showing you compared to other leaders how you are acting out of a creative versus a reactive orientation. It also reflects the degree to which your self-concept and inner motivation is coming from within versus being determined by external expectations, rules, or conditions. And the higher score is going to be more effective. You've also got a relationship versus a task balance, meaning are you focused more on achieving? Are you focused more on relating? And if you were at the 100th percentile, that would be evenly balanced, which is ideal. Your leadership potential utilization is comparing your reactive versus creative to your relationship and task summary dimensions to other leaders. So it's not just you. This is compared to a database of hundreds of thousands of other leaders who have taken this particular assessment. And it's basically answering the question, how are you doing? And then you'll also see a leadership effectiveness scale, which is measuring your overall effectiveness. And it's a compilation of the other three dimensions put together. It is not compared to other leaders who have taken the assessment, and it's very effectively correlated to business outcomes. Now, if you were to do the actual paid assessment, it would take about 2 hours to do a debrief. You would not get your results prior to the debrief. So for those of you who did do the free assessment, you kind of got a sneak preview, and now we're going to do a high-level debrief. And during that debrief, we would actually partner to have a conversation in order to identify the patterns and habits of thinking which might cause you to have higher scores on the reactive half of the circle. And the intention there is to identify whatever limiting beliefs you might have so that we could identify mindset shifts in order for you to step up your game as a leader. And the ultimate intention of doing an assessment like this is for you to identify specific areas where you might not be at the 100th percentile on the creative side or as high as you would like to be on the creative side. And you might be scoring higher than you would like to be on the reactive side. And to actually put in place a plan where you would like to improve your scores on the creative side or reduce your scores on the reactive side. And just to give you a feel, anything that is below 33rd percentile is considered low. Anything that's above 66th percentile is considered high. And again, those percentile scores are as compared to other leaders who have taken this assessment. So this is what a generic actual paid assessment might look like. And so what you're seeing is on the top half of the circle, the creative characteristics, and again, towards the center, you see 5 characteristics: the relating, the self-awareness, authenticity, systems awareness, and achieving, that break down then into 18 total characteristics on the top half. On the bottom half, you've got 3 reactive tendencies: complying, protecting, and controlling, that break down into more detail of 11 reactive tendencies. And the dark line is representative of how the person rated themselves, and the shading is how the other people who filled out the assessment on this leader's behalf rated them. So I think the most striking thing you may notice here, and it's a little bit hard to see perhaps on a screen, but at the very top, just at what might be 11 o'clock on the screen, in the authenticity range is integrity. And the person who did this rated themselves at the 80th percentile for integrity, and yet everyone else who answered the assessment on this leader's behalf thought that this person was at the 20th percentile for integrity. So you can see how, as a leader, if people think you're at the 20th percentile for integrity, it might be a challenge to have them follow you if they don't know what you stand for and they don't think you're really walking the talk. They don't think that your actions are aligned with your intentions and your talk, right? And the flip is sometimes true. Now, mostly on the top of this, you see that the person rated themselves much higher on the creative side than others rated them, especially on the left-hand side in relationship. And on the bottom, overall, the person rated themselves, where the dark line is, less reactive than others thought them to be. So for instance, the person thought they were at the 50th percentile for controlling, and others thought they were actually at the 70th percentile for controlling. So nobody likes to be managed by a control freak. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. All right, so that's generic. So let's move on to some of the specific profiles that some of you asked for me to cover confidentially. So this is going to be from a very high level. We're not doing a full debrief, obviously, so I don't have the opportunity to ask each of you some of the questions that I would normally ask you, and it won't be as detailed as it would normally be. So hopefully you're going to get some information, and if we're not doing yours specifically, please take what you see here and apply it to yours if you did do the assessment, and hopefully you'll get some value from it that way. So what you're seeing here is a person who is fairly evenly balanced between reactive and creative. You actually see that they are at the 50th percentile for reactive to creative on the reactive creative scale. So they're about as evenly reactive as they are creative, which means actually a lot of opportunity for increasing how they show up as a leader on the creative side and reducing what they're doing in terms of their leadership that may be currently reactive. Their highest score on the creative side is in authenticity. They rated themselves at the 70th percentile compared to other leaders for authenticity. And on the lowest side, they rated themselves is self-awareness. So self-awareness is measuring the leader's orientation to ongoing professional and personal development, as well as the degree to which the person's inner self-awareness gets expressed through high integrity leadership. So that's an opportunity that the person might want to work on, increasing self-awareness, because they've rated themselves a little below 30 percentile, so that would be considered low. One of the interesting things that we see in the leadership circle is that there's always a correlation with opposites. And what I mean by that is whatever's on the opposite side of the circle is likely to pull it, almost like there's a tension. So the fact that controlling is so high on the bottom right-hand side of the circle here is literally sucking down the person's self-awareness here. And the fact that the authenticity is so high is correlated to protecting being low. And again, the systems awareness on the top kind of right-hand side is low because the complying is high. So it's really interesting the way that these opposites kind of attract here. So if we look at complying, this person rated themselves at about the 55th percentile for complying. So it's not quite high, but it's kind of just at the edge of complying. And so some of the internal assumptions that would go with complying, it's the belief that I'm okay if people like me, I'm worthy when others approve of me, I need to live up to others' expectations in order to succeed, I can stay safe by supporting other people, the world is a dangerous place, caution will make me safe, and loyalty and harmony and going along to get along are gonna protect me from disapproval. And people comply to create harmony and teamwork and preserve relationships, but complying is actually inversely related to relationships. So anyone who has rated themselves high in the complying area is obviously wanting to do well on relationships, and yet it's negatively impacting them here in terms of leader effectiveness and business performance. It's negatively correlated. So if your self-assessment that you did has you rate high in complying, just keep that in mind and notice if you didn't score lower in systems awareness and achieving than you might have liked to. And then the same is true if you look at controlling. People who are controlling obviously want to achieve results. I'm a recovering control freak myself. And I think for the most part, it's fair to say that control freaks tend to not trust others. We often believe that if we want something done right, we need to do it ourselves because we don't trust others to do it very well. But controlling is very negatively correlated to affecting, impacting results and business performance. So people who score high with controlling often have internal assumptions that they stay safe when they take charge, only the strong will survive, and I'm going to be one of them. I need to triumph over others to feel good about myself. Anything less than perfect is not okay. I'm a valuable person when others look up to me with admiration. The world is made up of winners and losers. Being less than others is unacceptable and threatens my security. Failure of any proportion could lead to my demise. So think about if those sound familiar to you in terms of internal assumptions. And, you know, are you somebody who wants to take charge, be on top, exert control over others to gain self-worth, personal safety, and your sense of identity? So historically, people who like to control feel like they have to be perfect and perform flawlessly and sometimes dominate. So yes, you can be one of the movers and the shakers, but it's hard to be a great leader that way. And it's definitely going to negatively impact your relationships with others, as you see here. All right, so let me move along here. So what you see here in this person's profile is definitely someone who's scoring higher on relationship and higher on the creative side than the reactive side. But again, as we discussed in the last profile, there's still a lot of complying going on. And so I think we touched a lot on what complying means in the last one, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Not a lot to add after what I said on the last one. So high on self-awareness, high on relating, really high on courageous authenticity. So this is the willingness to stand up and say what needs to be said. As Brene Brown would say, you know, say the bold thing. Also in the achieving, very high on strategic focus and purposeful and visionary. One of the other things you see in the leadership circle is that the way it's laid out, every slice of the pie is intentionally next to the thing that it's next to. They kind of flow into one another. So I think that pretty much covers it here. All right, for number 3, couple of things I want to say about this. I understand that it's always a challenge when we see that our results are more reactive, and we know that effective leadership and business performance, we want to see our results be more creative. And a couple of things could be going on. On the one hand, this person could be someone who's very tough on themselves and has very high expectations. On the other hand, if this were a assessment that included 360-degree feedback, what I would say is when someone's assessors include a lot of reactive feedback or feedback that's shows up as shaded areas being reactive, we say this doesn't mean you're a bad leader or a bad manager. This means that your people want to see more of something in you. So if someone's answering a question that says, I never see this in you, I seldom see this in you, I sometimes see this in you, it means they want to see it more frequently in you. And I know this is a self-assessment and not other people saying it. So same thing is true. You want to see more of this in you. And the other thing, I mentioned it's not a measurement of the stages of adult development. And at the same time, it can show where someone might be in terms of the stages of adult development. So people who are on the reactive side of the circle are tending to get their sense of self-worth from what others think of them. So when you're scoring high in the protecting, it means that you tend to keep yourself safe by acting aloof and maintaining distance in your relationships. And you might also be holding back from the risks that come from really deploying your creative abilities. So it's really staying safe by being above it all. Now, this could come from a lack of confidence or self-doubt or from superiority. It could be that you need to be right or find fault in others and build yourself up. But it also could be, and this is something we would determine in an actual debrief, that something has happened recently, that someone lost a job and you're worried about how you're going to pay the bills. So there could be a pivotal event that has happened that is requiring you to be in a protective stance right now. And that's something that is hard to say without knowing more. In terms of the complying, the scoring high on the complying scale typically suggests that you tend to relinquish power to other people and the circumstances of life. And you might tend to think that you're at the mercy of circumstances and that you don't have a lot of control. So again, this could be related to a recent event, something that's happened that you feel the need to comply recently. You
Wendy,
might, yeah.
because of this relevance, the question about highly correlated, how about related to your role in your organization? And for example, if you're in a relationship building role, this would score higher on an assessment, or how would you see the results on that?
Well, it's a self-assessment, right? So if you're in a relationship building role and you're answering questions through the lens of just your role at work, yes, there could be an influence there. It's a little bit hard to say how the person was answering. So roles can come into play. You know, if you think about the movie Up in the Air, where I can't think of the actor's name. Somebody goes in and acts as all of the people, right? That's somebody who's not going to be very relationship oriented. Someone who's willing to go in and fire people and then leave is not a relationship oriented people. It has to be somebody who's just focused on achieving the results, right?
Was that the George Clooney one?
Yeah, George
okay.
Clooney.
My IMDb moment. Well, thank you for letting me interrupt briefly on that one. And again, as a reminder, while Wendy's doing this, feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat box, and I'll do my best to politely interrupt, or we'll have some time at the end as well to ask questions.
Yeah, thanks. And so some of these things where you're seeing the reactive being higher than you want, it could be that there's something that just happened in the last year or two. Some of them are assumptions that, you know, may have happened as a child. So we really take a deep dive and look at what are the habits of thought and patterns of thinking that you've picked up over the years, you know, as a child, as you transitioned into the workforce, and very recently that might be showing up in your results. So I hope that helps. And you definitely see, again, this opposite correlation where the fact that there are some high reactive scores is limiting the extent to which there are high creative scores here. And what you do see on the reactive side that's high is balance. So balance is at the 70th percentile, which is considered high. So it looks like, and I don't know, this person has a fair amount of balance in his or her life, despite whatever else might be going on. So I hope that is supportive. All right, number 4. So not too dissimilar from the last one. We have protecting and complying, again, high, and controlling fairly high, at least in the driven and perfect portions of controlling. And then on the creative side, We have in the relating, we have caring connection, mentoring and developing, and interpersonal intelligence at about the 40th percentile. So that's in the mid-range. Balance, very high. Personal learner, again at about the 40th percentile. And then in authenticity, 90th percentile compared to other leaders, very high. Sustainable productivity, 90th percentile, very, very high. So sustainable productivity is part of systems awareness, and systems awareness is really talking about the extent to which the leader's awareness is really focused on whole systems improvement and productivity and community awareness. And sustainable productivity is specifically looking at being able to achieve results in a way that's going to maintain or enhance the overall long-term effectiveness of the organization. And typically that person is going to be really good at balancing human and technical resources to be able to maintain long-term high performance, which, you know, companies love. And most of us, well, I don't know if it's fair to say most of us, but many of us may not think about as much as our organizations might like for us to think about. I think that's fair to say. So again, what you see here though is the complying is definitely affecting the achieving. So you've got that offset on the opposites here. So opportunity to select some things that this leader would like to focus on improving, and look at how might this person focus less on complying with others and shift up on the relating side, focusing more on what they want to achieve rather than giving way to caring about what others want in terms of the relationship side. So just kind of a swing up into the relating from the complying, which will also allow them to improve scores more into systems awareness and achieving as well. All right, let me move on to the next one. And again, I kind of stacked some of these close that were similar to one another. So complying, again, high. If we can decrease the complying by worrying a little bit less about the areas of complying and more about relating, shifting that up, it will improve things not only in the relating, but also opposite complying into the achieving. And the only other thing that's really scoring high on the bottom here is the distance section of protecting. So this person is protecting themselves in by keeping some distance between themselves and others, and sees that as a way to keep some safety, perhaps. And then also scoring very high here in the self-awareness category. So great there. And definitely purposeful and visionary is high here. All right, and on number 6, this person is scoring at the 75th percentile for the reactive creative score scale. So much higher on the creative side, and the only category that this person scored low in on the creative side was the caring connection. Everything else is either in the mid-range or high for creative competencies. And then on the bottom, still scored very high at about the 85th percentile for protecting, and yet managed to still score high on its opposite with authenticity. So 40th percentile for controlling, only at the 20th percentile for complying. So still an opportunity to maybe reduce protecting on the bottom, and doing very well on the top. So this person can choose kind of where they want to focus, whether it's fostering team play and improving caring connection, and just increase some of those at the top, taking them further towards the 100th percentile, and maybe focus on reducing protecting and controlling a bit, or some of the specific ones within controlling and protecting that were a bit higher. Number 7. So here we have authenticity and systems awareness and achieving and relating, some really high scores on the creativity side. Controlling was the area on the reactive side that was most high. So we talked a little bit about that with some of the others. I think most of us who went to William and Mary have some tendencies to try to be perfect and driven and ambitious. I think that goes without saying, but it is negatively correlated to being an effective leader and business performance. So there's an opportunity to be more effective as a leader by focusing on swinging up to the right with achieving, and limiting the ambitious and driven and perfectionist. And then this person, the only other area that was high on the bottom was pleasing. So opportunity there. And then the self-awareness opportunity to increase that was at the 30th percentile. So a little bit low. And specifically the selfless leader and composure and personal learners. And then systems thinker on the top to improve that a little bit. Number 8. The complying, again, a little bit high. We seem to have a lot of William and Mary people that like to please others, looks like. And so on the top side, scoring higher than the other categories at the 40th percentile on relating and on systems awareness and opportunity to bring up self-awareness and authenticity and achieving. And on the bottom side, it looks like the highest was complying, and then right after that, controlling, but protecting very low. So opportunity to focus on maybe decreasing complying and controlling that were a little bit high, and focus on bringing up the others, and looking at what are the beliefs that have this person complying, and what would give you the biggest impact in your leadership by focusing on the top half to improve. Number 9. So this person's at 90th percentile for authenticity, which is stellar. 70th percentile overall for systems awareness. And 70th percentile also in relating. So the opportunities for growth in creativity would be self-awareness and achieving. And then very similarly at the bottom, all 3 of the reactive tendencies are around 20th to 25th percentile. So that's really great. Everything in the low category there. And you see the relationship to task balance on this particular one is a little below 50th percentile.
Wendy, I'm just going to chime in that we have some great questions. So thank you all for typing them in. I'm going to wait till you conclude because I know you have a few more. I'll let you finish up and then we'll come to questions, okay?
Yeah.
Great.
And I don't think I have a lot that's very different here. So I just have 2 more slides. So this one, number 11, this person actually rated themselves at about the 100th percentile for passive in the complying area and 90th percentile for complying overall. So that's the highest we've seen on passive. And ambition. So interestingly, ambition with the leadership circle, it really means ambition in terms of like climbing over other people to be ambitious. That's what they mean. It's not just, I want to get ahead, it's at the cost of other people. So not overall high on controlling, 20th percentile, but complying very much so. And so some opportunities for here, fairly balanced on all of the creative competencies are fairly balanced, but it's the complying that's the one that's most able to reduce something to bring up these relating scores, because the relating is lowest here because the complying is highest here. Okay, and then number 12, again, conservative and pleasing, very much so. And then again, you see the relating and self-awareness a little bit lower here. So if you reduce these are going to naturally increase. And the systems awareness and achieving is really high. And if you reduce this controlling here, it's going to have the opposite here increase with the relationship and the systems awareness. Okay, so just a few questions for you to think about. Overall, what difference would it actually make for you if you were able to identify the internal assumptions that were limiting your effectiveness as a leader? And if you could recognize where those assumptions had arisen and realize that they were false, and what would shift for you in your career if your behaviors and your internal assumptions led to high fulfillment, high achievement leadership? What if your relationships to others, what if you related to others in a way that brought out the best in people groups and organizations? And how would your career and your personal life shift if you were equally balanced between your tasks and your relationships? Michael, let me come back on screen. I know you said you had some questions.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to thank you. I know you have another slide that is after this, I believe. There's one more slide. So I encourage you all, if we don't get to the questions, to connect with Wendy for additional conversations. And certainly, I know she's a fan of doing the full 360 assessment and would love to speak to any alumni interested in that and figure out a special rate for the alumni community. Thank you, Wendy, again. Terrific program, fascinating assessment. I actually did this assessment with you all and enjoyed learning a little bit about the sort of areas that we can all improve in our leadership efforts. So a couple questions that came in, a little bit about, you know, first off, do you see any gender breakdowns in tendencies in certain areas, whether women skew higher on certain areas or so forth, or similarly in age and how different ages tend to score?
No, not at all.
Cool. And then when working on becoming a better leader, how do you balance improving the weaknesses versus capitalizing on the strengths?
Well, typically it's challenging to work on more than about 3 things at once. So what we do is look for the 3 things where we think we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck, if you will. And we look at 3 different things. On the top half of the circle, what's the area that you want to improve the most? So that could be, what is the lowest score that you think is the most important to improve upon. Let's say you're in a sales role and your relating is really low. That's going to be really important, right? Or any people related role and your relating is really low, or a leading role and your integrity is really low. It could be where there's a very large gap between how you view yourself and how others view you. And it could be something on the bottom that's much higher than you need it to be. So we look in relationship to your role, and we look at either how big the gap is between how you view yourself and how others view you. So those are the variables we're looking at, and we're trying to identify 3 things. And once we work on closing those 3 gaps, then we pick the next 3 things.
Great. I hope I asked this correctly. If leadership aspects are next to each other for a reason, how is it that even within one category, for example, the systems awareness, there can be such a variation in the levels? Is that?
I understand the question. Can't tell you the answer, but you can look at the questions when you take the full profile. And you definitely don't get this on the actual on the free assessment, but when you take the full assessment, they give you the questions you answered that produce your results. So you would see, oh, I answered these questions, and based on my answers, that's why I got that result.
Got it.
So for decisiveness, you might have said, yep, I seldom, I rarely. And yet the one next to it, you might have said, I always, I frequently.
Got it. Well, hopefully that helped, and that makes sense in the way that you answered that. And so, what other things can one do not to be so passive? And since many of the results have high complying and passivity in some of the aspects of the leadership circle.
I would look for, I would keep a notebook perhaps. And the next time you're in a meeting and someone asks for who will put your hand up. Doesn't matter what they're asking for, do it. Because you're definitely missing opportunities to be the one. If you're passive, you're not jumping in.
Great. Good. Be proactive and jump right in.
Or go to someone, whether it's one of your direct reports or whether it's your boss, and say, hey, what can I do to support you? Start volunteering.
Terrific advice for many individuals. And a couple more questions actually about resources that may be helpful for those that, in addition to this great assessment, what are some of the things that, whether it's books or other resources that you recommend, in particular for adult development and sort of the different stages of understanding that, and how we can supplement the assessment experience with ongoing resources? I guess, what do you follow? What are you reading, I guess, is a good question.
I'm reading a different book every month. Just read The CEO Next Door. There are different books I would recommend based on various categories that you scored high in. Literally for every area of this assessment that one might have scored high in, there are different books that I could recommend. The 2 gentlemen who developed this the leadership circle wrote Mastering Leadership and Scaling Leadership. Bob Anderson and Bill, I always get their names wrong. Is it Bill or Robert? Why don't I email it to you? So it's Scaling Leadership and Mastering Leadership. Mastering Leadership was the first one, and then Scaling Leadership was the second one. But they're both brilliant books.
Sorry, went on mute for a second there, but that's great. We'll check out those. Any other assessments that you would recommend in addition to the circle assessment, leadership circle?
What I like about this one is, unlike Myers-Briggs or DISC or any of those that are fixed, right? Those tend to be personality profiles and indexes that, whether we took them as a child or we took them in our adult lives, they're not going to change. They're saying who we are, how we interact with others. But this is something you could take every year or every 18 months, and it will change as you develop, as you grow, as you develop your leadership skills, you will see the changes. So this is a little bit like a Google map. You need to know where you are, and then you choose where you want to go, and you can tell if you're getting there.
Great. And actually, one question to follow up on that I was going to ask is, how frequently, especially if you do the 360, I can imagine you want to know where you stand related to your assessors, and how you've improved or changed in a way since, you're trying to accomplish a better profile as a better leader. How frequent is the tendency that you tell your clients or encourage?
So as an assessment, it can be every year. I typically would say every 18 months, but what I recommend that people do is called stakeholder-centered coaching, where you identify a few of the people around you once you've chosen the things that you want to work on improving, and you let some of these stakeholders in your organization know, hey, I got the feedback. I understand that these are areas that I can work on, and these are the 3 things I've selected to work on improving, and check in with them on a monthly basis and say, how am I doing on this? How am I doing on this? How about now? And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, they have a bias. They have come to believe that you are a person who, for instance, doesn't listen. So their bias is going to assume that you always are going to be that person who doesn't listen. So you actually need to ask, how am I doing on not listening? How am I doing now? In order to change that bias. So they actually have to think, oh, hey, yeah, you're starting to listen. Hey, yeah, you're now a person who listens. And if you don't check in and ask, they will still think of you as someone who doesn't listen. But it also gives you the feedback of if you're improving or not.
Great. Well, on that note, we have almost reached the hour point, and I want to thank Wendy for joining us this week during Professionals Week. The sort of short story that I'll share is that Wendy and I were actually in DC at the embassy event this past fall and connected. She was visiting some friends of hers in the William & Mary community from her days as a student, and was in town and attended that event. We connected there, and I learned about her coaching background and was thrilled that she was willing to be a part of this week and present to you all today. I encourage you to stay in touch with Wendy and reach out to her for additional questions. I encourage you all, no matter, wherever you are this week calling in from, to participate in some of the programs. We have over 20 events, 19 of which are in person around the country, and 4 of them are online, including today's webinar and another online networking hour the end of the week, and another webinar tomorrow. So thank you all for joining us. I encourage you to stay in touch, hashtag One Tribe, One Network online with social media channels, and go Tribe. Have a great rest of the week. Take care. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Michael.